what we're going to do today is we're going to start talking about the end of the streams in Java streams, and we'll be focusing on terminal operations. Thus far, we've talked a bit about creation operations, the various factor methods to make streams. We talked a little bit about some of the intermediate operations, in particular things like map and flat map and filter. And now we're going to focus in on the end of the path, the terminal part. And terminal operations do a couple of things. First, they trigger all the other processing, so nothing happens until the terminal operations are reached. And they also then produce some result in various ways, either directly in terms of returning a primitive or a collection, or by having some kind of a side effect. And we'll see that these operations that we'll talk about apply to both parallel and sequential streams, although there are some subtleties you have to be aware of as you start trying to use them in parallel streams. We'll also continue to showcase our Hamlet program that we've looked at before, because this is a nice way to demonstrate some different ways of handling termination of a stream. So every stream, if you want it to run, has to finish with a terminal operation that typically, not always, but typically yields a non-stream result. We'll see there's sort of one or two special cases where you can have terminal operations that return streams, but that's not the common case. There can only be one. We talked about before, you can only have one terminal operation per stream. Of course, you'll see how to chain these things together in a clever way, but that's still not quite the same thing as being able to have more than one terminal operation. Now, some terminal operations will yield no values at all. So the forEach family of terminal operations, like forEach and forEach ordered, will return no values at all. And these are examples of run to completion operations. Rather than returning a value, they have a side effect. And we'll see what that side effect is. It involves passing in some kind of a method reference or a lambda expression to do something with respect to the output of the stream. Here's a very simple example. This is where we're going to have the characters in Hamlet. We're going to get rid of anybody whose name doesn't start with uppercase or lowercase h. We're going to capitalize everybody consistently. We're going to sort the results. And then we're going to use the forEach terminal operation to print the results out in order, because we've sorted them. So Hamlet and Horatio will show up in order. Another form of a terminal operation will result in something. And this is typically called a reduced result. And the two examples of this are collect and reduce. We'll talk a lot about collect. Collect is very common, or it's to-list variant, very, very common way of doing things. These are also run to completion operations, unless, of course, there's an intermediate operation that's short-circuiting, as we've talked about before. And we'll see that collect and reduce also work seamlessly with respect to sequential streams and parallel streams. So once you understand sequential streams, the parallel stream stuff is pretty straightforward. The third category of terminal operations are ones that either return an optional, like find first, for example, which you use in your programming assignment, or a Boolean value, which would be something like none match or all match and so on. And so these are examples of yet other kinds of operations that return results that are not collections per se, although you could have an optional that returns a collection. But typically they're used for other purposes. And a lot of these are also short-circuiting. They will conclude as soon as they reach the point where they're done, or they know that they're done. As we've talked about before, terminal operations are what trigger all the intermediate operation processing. That's why the intermediate operations are lazy. So you can kind of think of it like the green flag that starts a race in a road race, like a Grand Prix or an Indy 500 kind of race. And that's the end of the overview of terminal operations. Now, we're going to be focusing quite a bit on collect. We're going to focus a little bit on reduce. You'll need to know both collect or its to-list variant for the assignments. You're also going to have to understand how reduce works for the parallel streams assignment. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. But before that, I'm going to talk about some other variants, such as the forEach family, just because you need to be aware of them, even though I don't typically recommend you use them, except for things like debugging and examples that you want to showcase the way that streams work.